Hi friends, welcome to art. This is our level 3 spring birds video. If you've already watched video 1 and video 2, awesome, welcome back. If this is your first video, then I can't wait for you to do the drawing with us and I can't wait to see what you create. We're going to create 3 birds in this video. The difference between level 3 and 1 and 2 is we are going to make our birds look a little more realistic. We're also going to draw 2 spring flowers to add to our picture, and we're going to add lots of details. So to do this directed drawing, you're going to need a piece of white computer paper, drawing paper. You're going to need a good pencil and a good eraser because we are going to be doing a lot of erasing. All right, if I go too fast in your video, all you have to do is pause it and catch up and then hit play again and you'll be right there with us. All right, here we go. I'm going to move my screen so that you can watch me draw. It's going to take just a second, so bear with me and then we will be ready to go. All right. Remember, the key to this drawing is to have fun doing it. So don't get frustrated if your picture doesn't look exactly like mine. Just keep right on going and always do your best art. All right, let's see here. This is the hardest part for me, is getting the camera all set up for you. All right, I'm hoping that you'll be able to see my pencil drawing because I did the first 2 videos in Sharpie marker, but because we have to do so many details and we're going to be doing some overlapping, that you are going to want me to do this in pencil also because I'm going to have to erase to make it look the way I want it to look. All right, here we go. We're going to start off with, like I said, we're doing 3 birds. We're going to start off with our bird's body, and we're going to work in the middle of our paper because we're going to do the medium-sized bird or the middle bird first. So find the middle of your paper, and the way we're going to create the bird's body is we are going to start with almost like a half a heart shape. So here's about the center of my paper, so I'm going to go at that center point, and I'm going to go up and around and come down, just like if I was making a heart. So if you can see that, I went up and around and came down, but instead of making a point like a heart, I'm going to curve it around like a bowl and bring it out to the opposite side with a point. Okay, and that's going to be our bird, the bottom half of our bird's body. So I went around like a heart, and then I curved the bottom like a bowl, the bottom of a bowl, and then I went out in the opposite direction. Okay, we're going to do that 2 more times, but we're going to alternate the way our birds face. This is going to be our bird's head. So this bird is facing in this direction, so I want the bird above it to be facing in the opposite direction. So if my head started on this side over here, I'm going to start my bird on this side for the next one. So same steps. We're going to go around and down like it's half of a heart, and then we're going to curve it and come back up and stop. Now this bird's going to be smaller, so I'm drawing my bird a little bit smaller than the one below it, and he's going to be standing on that bird's back. So now we have 2 birds, and we have to do our last bird. Our last bird's going to be on the bottom, and it's going to be our largest bird. Okay? We're going to use the same steps, but we don't want our birds to be touching. I want them to be standing on each other's back. They're kind of stacked up. So we're going to start, because we're alternating, so we want this direction, then over here. Now we're coming back over on this side, and I want to go below my bird. I don't want to have them overlap. And I'm going to come around all the way over here and make my heart shape, and then curve it around and come back up. All right, so I went around, curve, and back up. And that's going to be my 3rd bird's body. Now we are going to add the wing. We're looking at the profile of our bird. Profile means we're looking at it sideways. So we're only going to see one wing. And we want that wing to look like it's laying on top of the bird's belly or body. So I'm going to start where our tail would be, which is at this point. And we're going to come from that tail all the way to the base of where your bird's head is. So I'm bringing a line all the way to the base of his head, and then when I get there, I'm curving it around and then going back to the point where I started. It's almost like a teardrop shape. You see that teardrop? We came around, curved it, and then went right back up. Okay, so that's our teardrop shape, and that's going to be our bird's wing. Doing the same thing for our middle bird. So I'm starting where his tail would be. I'm coming down to where the base of his head is. When I get there, I curve it around, and then I'm coming back. And I want to make sure that my curve's big enough so that it looks like a wing. I don't want to make it too small. Okay, don't make it too narrow. And then finally for my largest bird, the same step. Starting at his tail, coming down to the base of his head, curving it around, and then going back. And I didn't quite make it to the base of his head. I have a little bit of space. All I have to do is just add that line down there to connect them. Okay, so now we have our 3 birds that have their bodies and their wings. Now we're going to start adding some more of those details to it. So first I'm going to just draw our triangle beacon, and it's pretty basic. I'm just starting on the side of his face. Remember, it's his profile, so we're going to see the side of his beak. So I'm going to come out and go back. And if you just want to do a basic bird for all of them, that's the same shape you're going to do for all 3 of your birds. So I'm just going to start on the side of his head and a small triangle and come back to his head. And you're going to want to draw lightly. We've talked a million times in art class to draw light till you've got it right. You're going to want to do that same thing on these birds, okay? I'm pushing a little bit harder because I want you to be able to see it on the camera, but you're going to want to draw lightly, especially if we go back and add some details to make the birds a little bit different, like I'm going to show you in a second. These are all very basic birds. We can tell that they're birds, but they all look the same. If we want to make them different types of birds later on, we're going to want to be able to erase. All right, then we can go into the eyes. Now, I'm going to stop for just a second and bring my eye sheet over. We've talked about eyes in art class before, and I have a couple different examples on here. You can make just a basic round eye with our reflection spot. We've talked about that reflection spot. We can do our rainbow eye, so we do the rainbow line, and then we do another smaller rainbow line underneath, and then we have our pupil and our iris. I have a raindrop eye where I did a raindrop shape, and then our pupil with a reflection spot. And then just another round eye, but I used a larger reflection spot in this one, and the pupil is on the side. Okay? You may do your eyes however you would like them, depending on how realistic or how cartoonish you want your birds to look. That will be an indicator on how you want to do your eyes. If you wanted to draw eyelashes, we all know that real birds don't have eyelashes, but if you wanted to draw some eyelashes on your birds, absolutely. This is completely up to you and how creative you want to be on it. Okay, I'm going to do 3 different eyes. So on my first one, I'm going to do the rainbow shape. So I did my rainbow line, and I know it's really hard to see on here, but I did my rainbow line and then my smaller rainbow underneath. And then you're going to do your pupil and your iris. And in your pupil, you have your little reflection spot and you color it in. Okay? My second one, I'm just going to do a round eye with a small reflection spot. And I can color in the rest of that pupil. And that's more realistic for birds. If you've ever looked at a bird up close, they have really round black eyes. They don't have any color in their eyes. And then finally, my third eye, let's do the raindrop shape. So I'm going to do a small raindrop, give myself a pupil, put a reflection circle in there. And I know, again, it's hard for you to see, but you can understand those steps. So my raindrop shape, my pupil, and then I color in the outside of the pupil and leave that reflection spot white. Okay, and I can bring it a little bit closer so you can see those 3. Ooh, this way, Mrs. A. Okay, so now we have our bodies, our wings, our beaks, and our eyes. Okay, so now we're going to think about the tails on our birds. And again, you can make them look as realistic or as cartoonish as you'd like. In the first 2 videos, we used ovals and just raindrop shapes. This one, we're going to think more about what that bird's feathers would look like. So I can come out and give it some more realistic feathers. This one I just did some like zigzag lines. So I went out and came in, out, and in, out, and in. And it kind of looks like it has some spiky feathers on the end. If you've taken a look in a book or at some real birds, some of them, their tails look like they're almost squared off at the end. Those feathers are squared. So I'm going to start at the back of the wing, and I'm going to act like that wing is on top of the back of the tail. So I'm going to come out, and it's almost like it's squared off, or the end back of a triangle. Okay, and I can have my bird's tail look like that, or I can just put some small tufts again to give it the look that the feathers are just sticking out behind the bird. Okay, completely up to you. And then finally our feet, and our feet are going to come out from under our bird, and we don't want them to just be a stick, so you want 2 parallel lines. That means they're running side by side for each leg. So you have 2 for the first leg and 2 for the second. If you would like to put the toes on your bird so it looks like they're holding onto the back, you can, or you can make it look like they're behind that wing and you can't see them. Okay, and we're going to do that for all of our birds. So 1, 2, and I kind of make it look like a reverse tree. I make it a little bit wider at the body of my bird, and then it gets skinnier the farther down it goes. So it looks like the top of his leg is a little bit wider. Again, I know it's hard to see in the video, but think about what that step would look like. So a little bit wider, just like the trunk of a tree is a little bit wider at the bottom. And then as it goes up, it runs parallel, it runs side by side, all the way up to the branches. Okay, we're going to do that for the legs. Okay, so bring it closer so you can see. It's a little bit wider by the belly, and then it gets skinnier, and they run parallel or side by side all the way down. And I stopped right here because later on I'm going to add some details to my ground. Okay? All right. So now we have our 3 birds, and if you love the way these birds look, then just keep them this way. That's awesome. This picture will turn out really cool. If you want to make them a little more realistic, or you want to put more spin and make each bird a little bit different, right now is a great time to do that. I'm going to show you an example that I drew before. And on this example, I chose a hummingbird, a cardinal, and then I just kept my 3rd bird the same. Okay, and the only changes I made was in my hummingbird. I added a longer beak, and I added some details to his wing and gave him a color change. So that would be 2 different spots where I would have different colors, maybe a lighter belly and a darker back. So I drew a line to give myself an indication where that color change would be. On my cardinal, he definitely has the point at the top of his head. If you've ever taken a look at a cardinal, they're beautiful birds. Cardinals and blue jays both have that point or that crown on top of their heads. And then on all 3, I added some details inside my wing to show that the feathers are layered, or they have some texture to them. Okay, so if we want to work on some of those steps inside my feathers, I can add some lines to show that it's not just one solid feather in his wing. He has layers of feathers. Okay, in this one, if I wanted to add that shading to show a distinction in color, okay, I can do almost, they're like zigzag lines. So I went in and out again, kind of like I did on my tail, to give it some texture. And then I can go underneath and shade it in to look like the bottom part of this bird has darker feathers at the bottom of his wing. Okay. If I wanted to take the top, and we talked about erasing, I can erase the top of my bird's head, and I can go up and add a few tufts of feathers up at the top of his head. I can, let's talk about that cardinal or that blue jay. I can take my eraser and I can just take that top of his head, and I'm going to make it go up to a point and come back down. And I'm going to erase until I get it where I want it. Up and come back down. Okay. And he gets that cardinal point. All right. And then on a cardinal or a blue jay, they have some coloring on their face. It almost looks like a mask. So you start where that point is and you come around the eye and then back towards the beak and down towards the bottom of his head, and you give him a mask. Okay. If you guys want to take a look at some birds in a bird book, or even watch outside for some birds and see some of the characteristics those birds have and use those in your drawings, that would be awesome. All right. In the beak of a cardinal, it's a short beak. So we talked about the hummingbird having a long beak. The cardinal still keeps his short beak, and I'm just drawing a line, a curved line around that beak so it looks a little more realistic. I can take this bird up here and erase the beak that we drew, and I can add a longer, skinnier beak if I wanted to do that hummingbird look. And I'm going to draw a horizontal line inside that triangle I did for the beak to show the top and the bottom. Okay, so all I did was draw a horizontal line inside there. All right, and then for my bottom bird, I can just do some basic details. Again, if I don't like how plain the top of his head looks, I can erase that top part and go up and give him some tufts of feathers. Okay, I can add that horizontal line inside his beak so that it looks like he has that top and bottom beak. I can add some lines inside his wing to show the layers of feathers inside that wing. Okay, so right now we have our 3 birds. They look pretty cool. All right, and again, if you don't want a cardinal, if you wanted all 3 of your birds to look the way we started with them, keep them that way. If you wanted to change them, if you wanted to pick different birds, okay, look at some characteristics of some of the different birds and add those details in. And the more details you add, the more realistic it'll look. Okay, so right now I'm going to stop with the details on my birds, and we're going to start thinking about the flowers. All right, so we're going to do some overlapping in here. We're going to do 2 different types of flowers. First one is going to be our tulip. So we're going to start at the bottom of our paper, and we're going to go up, and I'm going to go up to my bird's beak and stop and pick it up on the other side. And then when I get up to my middle bird, that's where I'm going to stop because I want the flower part to be even with my top bird. Okay, so I went from the base of my paper, the bottom of my paper, up. If you have to do any overlapping, you stop and go pick it up on the other side and come up. And I'm going to do that 2 times because I want my stem not to just look like a straight stick. I want it to look like it's 3-dimensional. Okay, so I brought it straight up. So I have my 2 lines. Now, the first part of the tulip is our teardrop shape. So I'm going to start above my bird where the top of my top bird's head is. And I'm going to start at a point right there, and I'm going to come down and around, and I'm going to curve it right when I get to the stem of my tulip. I'm going to curve it around. Now if you hit, I'm hitting my bird's feathers, so I'm going to overlap it. I'm going to make it look like those feathers are in front of the tulip. So I'm not going to draw through my bird's feathers. I'm going to stop and pick it up on the other side. Okay, so there's my teardrop shape. So you're going to draw a teardrop shape for the front of your tulip. And then we're going to add the other petals on the side. So I'm going to start on the side of this teardrop, and I'm going to go up and come down like the top of a triangle. Okay, so I went up and came down. And instead of stopping, I'm going to keep going through. Remember, we're overlapping, so we're not drawing through our bird. We're drawing behind our bird and the bottom of until I get to the bottom of that tulip, and I curve it around. Same thing on the other side. Up and down. Now I hit the edge of my paper, so I have to pretend like that tulip's going to keep going around, and then I'm going to come back and finish it off at the bottom of my teardrop. Okay, and that's going to be my tulip, and I can add some details to that tulip. I can add some shading on the side. Okay, so I'm going to pick, if my light source Like if the sun, I thought the sun was on this side of my picture, then my shadows are going to be on the opposite side, so I can make it darker on that side of my tulip. So I can go through and add some shading to make that tulip stand out a little bit more, but I wouldn't put shading on the whole thing, just on the opposite side of where that light source was coming from. Okay, so now we have our tulip flower, and we have our stem, and we can add some leaves to it. So I'm going to start away from the stem with a point, and I'm going to do that same teardrop shape. And when I get to the stem, that's when it starts to curve around. So I'm going to come out on this side, and I'm going to go around like a teardrop shape. When I hit my stem, I curve it around and come back up to my point. Again, pull it a little bit closer so you can see. So you can see our teardrop shape that we did on our tulip. And then we went up and around on the sides and up and around. And then I did my teardrop shape for both of my leaves. Okay, now inside your leaves, you can add your veins to your leaves, which is just a straight line that goes towards the point or the end of our leaf, and then some diagonal lines going down it. Okay. All right, now we can add the ground. So we talked about where our birds were standing. I'm going to draw a ground line that goes across. I don't want the ground to be the bottom of my paper. I want it to look like my bird's standing on something and my tulips are growing out. Okay, so if we want to add those 3 toes to our bird, 1, 2, 3. They're just 3 points that we draw out. Okay, 3 points for each of our feet. So it looks like our bird's standing on the ground. All right, and then finally our last flower. We're going to go up just like we did before. But this flower we want to stop, the stem to stop at the tail of our biggest bird, because we want this flower to be almost in the face of the middle bird. And we're going to draw a daisy, but we're going to draw like the profile of a daisy. So it's not straight on, it's the side view of it. So up here in my middle bird, I'm going to draw a small vertical line, and then a curved line that connects it. And that's going to be the center of my daisy. So I did a small vertical and a curved line, and then I'm going to do those teardrop shapes. Around and point. Around. I didn't like that one, so I'm going to erase it. Around and point. And you can draw as many as you want. You can have them go outside the paper. You can have them come around. And so it looks like they're leaving the paper and coming back. If you want to do layers. Okay, so I went all the way, and I didn't go all the way around my daisy because, again, remember we said the profile is the side of it. So this bird is looking at the front of the flower. We're seeing the side of the flower. So we don't want to go all the way around. We just want to do it from the top, one side, and when we get to that bottom, we're stopping. We're not going to go around into our bird. Okay? And you can add some details to that flower. So if you want to draw some lines in your petals to make it look like it has some texture or movement to it. Okay, if you want to draw some dots in the center of yours so it looks like the seeds are starting to come out of it. Okay, if you want to add some more of that shading, remember our light source is coming from this side. We shaded this side of our tulip, so it's still up here. So our shading would be at the bottom, so it looks like the light source is above. So when you're thinking about your shading, remember your light can't change. So we can't put the shadows over here just because we want to. We have to think about where that light source is in our picture. Okay? And then once I have that daisy drawn, now I'm going to decide where I want that stem to come from. And I'm going to connect my stem to my daisy. And it doesn't have to be a straight line. You can see in mine, that I curved my stem to make it meet towards the back of my daisy so it looks like the stem is growing back here. Okay? And then we can add some more leaves. And in this example, I added some spikier leaves. It's almost like dandelion leaves. Okay? You can choose what kind of leaves you want. If you want to do the teardrop leaves again because they're the easiest, go ahead and do that. All right? So we'll come down and around and come back, and you can put as many leaves as you would like on your flower. If you wanted to do different types of flowers, you can do that. If you are an excellent rose drawer and you wanted to draw a rose in your picture, you can add that into there. If you wanted to add your light source, add your sun in, or add some clouds. If you wanted to add some spring bugs into your picture, that would be really cool. All right. And again, like I said before, as many details as you want to add to make it look as realistic as possible. It can be as simple or as realistic as you'd like it to be, as long as you're having fun while you're drawing it. Okay. Then finally, the last step is just adding color, and that's completely up to you how you want to add your color. I think for this one, in the past, we've done a lot of Sharpie work, and then we used lots of different materials to add color in it. I think for a drawing like this, the best material that I would choose to use would probably be a colored pencil because of all the fine details. So if you choose to do our level 3 spring bird drawing and you draw out your picture and you want to show it to me, just take a picture of it, have mom or dad send it back to me in the comments. I would love to see your work. All right, guys, we'll talk to you next week. Bye.